Chapter 10, you are going to be introduced to the concepts of war and terrorism from a sociological perspective. We all know what war is. We can point it out when we see about it or hear about it. But for sociologists, the analysis is more complex. There are theories that you will learn about in this chapter that seek to explain why war occurs. You'll also learn about the costs of war. We don't maybe always think of it, but there are costs to war. Of course, personal costs to people who have family members fighting wars, or to the individuals fighting wars, to the people who live in areas where war is going on. Of course, personal costs, but there are also societal costs to war. There are also financial costs to war. The same thing is true of terrorism. There are individual costs of terrorism, there are financial, and of course, societal costs in terrorism. Um, in addition to that, you'll learn in this chapter that sociologists consider war and terrorism to be socially constructed. Remember, we've talked about social construction before, the idea that society defines what a concept or term means. And so not everyone views war as a social problem. Again, there's lots of disagreement about what is a social problem and what is not. And it's no less true when it comes to war and terrorism. For example, one person's war could be another person's moral action. One person's view of a particular instance of terrorism could be another person's view of heroism. So it's not quite as easy to define as we might think. Um, Again, not everybody is going to agree on whether something is a good war or a bad war. Just think about what is happening in Ukraine uh, for over a year. If you are Russian and you believe all the state issued propaganda about the war, you may think that the war that Russia started to try to take over Ukraine is good. On the other hand, if you are somebody who lives in Ukraine, you are very likely to think this is a bad idea. There are personal costs to me, there are social costs, there are financial costs. Although there are some separatists who do live in Ukraine and are happy that Russia is trying to annex um, Ukraine, that's probably not the majority of people. So as you study this chapter, I hope that you'll think about how you define war, how you define terrorism, and how the social construction of war and terrorism has been influenced for not only you, but of course everyone else in society by the messages we receive in society, but as well perhaps from a religion that we might practice, and of course just by our own personal convictions. So I think this is a fascinating chapter, and I hope that you enjoy learning about the sociological of war and terrorism as social problems.